Hello, everyone. Please welcome Joyce Heckman. Jo we'll just wait for 2 more minutes for other people to get in as well. Joyce, are we ready to start?
I'm ready.
Okay, awesome. Hi, everyone. So Joyce is an accomplished human resource executive who has had a broad and progressive roles in talent acquisition, talent management, and organizational effectiveness in the global financial services and public utility industries. It's a very big honor for us to have her here and talk about imposter syndrome, especially in the workplace. So Joyce, over to you now.
Thank you so much. And I'm so excited to be here with everyone today. And thank you for taking the time from your busy day to hear about this important topic. So let me share what our journey is going to be today. So three different spots. First is to help you understand the causes of the imposter syndrome and how it shows up. Recognize the effects of not addressing it, both for the individual and for the organization, and to identify ways to support individuals who have the imposter syndrome. So, as we get started, I'd like to ask you to put in the chat um, the imposter syndrome in your own words. Actually, since we have a small group, perhaps we could just do an open share. So, interested in your thoughts as to what you think imposter syndrome is.
I think what I think everyone can put this on chat, what imposter syndrome is according to them.
Can you see the chat? Because I cannot see it.
There's not a lot has come on chat. You can continue, Joyce.
Okay. So I'll share with you what I would call more of like the formal definition of what the imposter syndrome is. And this actually came from some work that was performed by a couple academics back in the 1970s. And it's the internal experience of believing that you are not as competent as others perceive you to be, and that your success is due to luck, timing, or deception rather than ability or skill. And where this came from was a study that was done by two women in academia, Pauline Rose Clance and Suzanne Imes at Georgia State University. And what they observed is that there were women who were part of their programs, and they saw that they were attributing their success due to luck. So when they were accepted into the program, it was more around, I think admissions made a mistake as opposed to they earned their spot. And they were really intrigued by all of this, and they did a study. They found that the origins of the imposter syndrome really start in childhood and childhood experiences, and that later research has really shown that it goes beyond women. And I think many times people think of the imposter syndrome as something that's tagged to women, but it's really not. It really runs across men and women, and they do experience it. So I'm curious, what are some signs that a client or a mentee might be struggling with imposter syndrome? Love to hear your thoughts.
Second guessing,
Yes.
not speaking up, not showing up,
Hmm.
trying to be invisible.
The whole self-confidence underneath it all. So I'll share some signs of the imposter syndrome. Persistent self-doubt, attributing success to luck or external factors that I mentioned as part of that original academic study, how women were feeling that they were admitted and it was due to some external factors opposed to their own accomplishment. Perfectionism, fear of being found out, meaning found out that you're not who people think you are, overworking to compensate because you don't feel like you're enough, so you need to work longer and harder just to prove it to yourself. Avoiding challenges or new opportunities, it causes a lot of stress. Um, Discounting achievements. So when someone says, "Oh, that was a phenomenal achievement," attributing the success to, well, that was my team, or um, I achieved this sales record because the economy was in my favor. And those may be factors, but not really looking at yourself and what you did and what you contributed to it. Um, Comparing oneself to others in a big way, struggling to accept constructive feedback. It's that lack of self-confidence, and it's felt like an attack, and emotional and physical stress. So burnout is an area that it shows up in. It's interesting to think about how it shows up in men versus women. And at the bottom of the slide, I noted a book that was written by two individuals, Own Your Greatness, Overcome Imposter Syndrome. And they had something in there that I thought was really interesting as to how it shows up in men versus women. So men tend towards underperforming. So they will accept a job that is below their skill set because that will help them avoid the anxiety and the discomfort. Then, when comparing themselves, they'll use peers as opposed to peers who are less skilled as they are versus others because it helps them feel better. Women really tend to take the opposite approach. Um, they tend to leap into the challenge, but it leaves them in a place where they're constantly feeling the imposter syndrome. And they continue to work harder when they receive negative feedback. So if I work a little longer, if I produce a little bit more, you know, I will be, I will get the validation. And in an academic perspective, women will tend to have a higher grade point average than men with the imposter syndrome. So as you can see, it shows up very differently in different populations. I'd also like to call out, and this is not something that I would say is an absolute, but I think it's like real, it's very interesting to look at what professions are most affected by the imposter syndrome. And what I would say is think about jobs that are high pressure. There's there's high expectations to perform, and individuals come in with high self expectations for performing well. So you see things like in academia, constant pressure to publish, um, and constant comparison. Healthcare profession, it's a perfectionist culture. Uh, mistakes can be devastating. Engineering, technology, very fast-growing fields. Can be very difficult, I would imagine, for folks in that to keep up. In the creative fields, subjective evaluation. I met someone a number of years ago who had had a degree from an art school, and she told me that she used to take business classes while she was there. And she said, "I love my business classes because it was one answer." So when she would take an exam, there was one answer to the question. When she presented her artwork, there's multiple opinions. And she really noticed the difference there. But those in the creative fields can be exposed to a lot of critique, and their work is on display many times. So there's that validation piece. People in corporate leadership position, will I be found out as not being unqualified? Will people see that I really shouldn't be here? I got here due to luck. If you think of the legal profession, adversarial, certainly very high stakes for performance. If you think of someone who is involved with trials, either criminal or civil, there's a lot at stake in those trials. So it's very competitive and they need to meet the highest standards. And entrepreneurs, I think one of the things that I've seen, especially since, I have my own firm now, is there's a lot of personal risks that you need to take on. There's a lot of uncertainty that you need to sort through. And, you are representing yourself. So you need to feel very confident when you go out there into the world. So I wanted to just share with you some quotes from some people, because when I first started getting into and reviewing information on this topic, I think one of the things that was really very interesting to me, and hopefully you will find it interesting as well, is that you can think of people who are very accomplished in their fields, but yet they walk around with the imposter syndrome as well. So I wanted to just share with you some quotes from these individuals. The first one called himself the involuntary swindler. That was Albert Einstein. The next one about every time I took a test, I was sure that it had gone badly. And every time I didn't embarrass myself or even excelled. I believed I fooled everyone once again. That was Sheryl Sandberg, who's part of Facebook. The third one, I had enormous self-image problems and very low self-esteem, which I hid behind obsessive writing and performing. I was driven through life very quickly. I felt so utterly inadequate. I thought the work was the only thing of value. And that was David Bowie. I have written 11 books, and each time I think, uh-oh, they're going to find me out. I've run a game on everyone, and they're going to find me out. And that is Maya Angelou. And the last one is, no matter what we've done, there comes a point where you think, how did I get here? When are we going to discover that I am in fact a fraud and take everything away from me? And that's the actor Tom Hanks. So if you think of the different fields these individuals are in, it kind of matches up very nicely to the list that I showed. Albert Einstein in academia, Sheryl Sandberg in technology, and in the arts, you have David Bowie, the author Maya Angelou, and the actor Tom Hanks in the creative field. So I thought it was really interesting because you see some of these individuals, you hear them speak, they accept awards, and they're at the pinnacle of their careers, but yet underneath it all, these are some of the self-doubt thoughts that are coming up for them. So before I start sharing some more information, I'd just like to pause and see what questions you have or comments. I'll move to the next slide. I wanted to share with you some numbers, and the reason I thought this might be of interest to the group is that it gives some perspective around the number of people who really feel the imposter syndrome. So there was something that was published in Bloomberg Workshift that 71% of CEOs and 65% of senior executives say they experience the signs of imposter syndrome, including low confidence, feeling incompetent or ill-equipped for their role. And if you think of people who step into those senior roles, you hear the expression like it can be lonely at the top. There's less people that they can talk to. There's less people that they can trust. So I can imagine, it's hard for me to imagine someone stepping into like a very senior role who may have been very well prepared technically to take it, could absolutely feel that way. There was another survey by Access Commercial Finance 25% of people that they surveyed said they felt the imposter syndrome. And I thought this was interesting. It actually stopped them from applying for promotions or jobs. So they didn't have the confidence to move forward, even to put their name out there for something that was bigger because of that self-doubt. There was an article published by Forbes last year that said that 62% of knowledge workers across the world experience the imposter syndrome. And what I will say is that people experience the imposter syndrome in degrees. So you may have some that feel it, and I'll give you an example. Someone gets promoted and they're starting a new job. So they need to show up differently. They need to exhibit different behaviors. They need to lead a team differently, and they can feel like an imposter going in. But once they get their footing, they don't feel that way anymore. But there's some people who continue to feel that way. And the people who are at the other extreme are the ones who have a lot of, it can lead to some health concerns. And I'll talk about that in a moment. It's another study that was done by KPMG that was cited in the article I've listed here in Forbes uh, that that mentioned that 75% of female executives have encountered imposter syndrome during their careers. I've seen some other information that said 72% of women and 63% of men have experienced the imposter syndrome in their workplace. And lastly, I thought it's always interesting to see what people are searching for. But in 2024, searches for the imposter syndrome surged 75%, indicating a growing awareness and concern about the phenomena. So people are seeing more information about it and looking further. And I can share personally that a number of years ago, there was an article on imposter syndrome that came across my professional reading. And as a result of that, it really led me down a path to explore this a little bit further, as some of the things that I had read were very relatable to me. And I wanted to understand it more. And in my practice, I do work with individuals who come to me feeling that they do have the imposter syndrome, and we do focus our sessions around working through those feelings and being able to feel better about their accomplishments and move forward. So why does it really matter? And I think I love to talk about this slide. I mentioned about how individuals who have the imposter syndrome can tend to overwork and work hard, overly hard, and over deliver. So while that may feel real good in the short run, in the long run, that's really not sustainable for the individual, and it does have an impact on the organization. If you have someone who has the imposter syndrome, so think of the man who will not who will take a job below his qualifications, or a woman who will not put herself out there for a promotion. That doesn't really help an organization because the organization is not able to leverage the talent that this individual brings. And it can also cause attrition of talent. If there are individuals who are overworking and very stressed out about their job because of the imposter syndrome, it isn't inconceivable that they could leave their employment and seek something else that has less pressure or less pressure or less responsibilities. And I actually know of there's someone who I have coached who that was specifically what this individual did, who was in a very high pressure position and decided to take a lower position in a different organization just to get away from it. So it does happen. So for the individual, for those who are experiencing it frequently, there is an impact to their mental health, feeling very anxious about, am I doing enough? That self-doubt coming in could lead to depression, feeling of fear. When they get into periods of high stress, that talk track in their mind, "Oh, I'm not good enough, I could be more," comparing themselves to others does not really help them to have good health as well as to perform at their best. They can get exhausted, cynical, burnt out, and in some cases may turn to addiction because the stress is so high. And that's the way that they choose to deal with the stress. So the cost of this to an organization and an individual, are quite high. So I want to pause there and get your reaction to this information.
Hi, Joyce. I quickly wanted to just give my inputs. I am a mentor to some of the ladies working and through WeAce, and I see a lot of women around the 15 to 20-year mid-career mark who are completely burnt out, exhausted. And it's easy to say, these are the tools, here are the frameworks, but it's almost like there is no hope. It's almost like I don't want to try. It's all over for me. uh, at the end of the road, how can I be vulnerable? And I was trying to do a Brené Brown, Daring Greatly, a session on that, and it's all about stepping into your courage and owning your faults and admitting to mistakes. It's so hard when you have this burden, that you're kind of secretly believing that you don't really own your space, and you're not really there because you earned it, and you're there because you're good. So there's, when we talk about courage, it's such a far cry from if someone's dealing with something like this. So I would be interested in, how do you bridge that gap? And I'm sure you've got more slides, but yeah, this just came up with something very that I've been working on and work with women who are transitioning from wanting to step into their courage and speak up more and, show up more and own those spaces that they shy away from. So this is enlightening me that this could be a huge barrier, and I'm listening in to see how I can help.
Sure. No, thank you so much. And that's actually, very true. And I can easily see that the material being presented on stepping into courage feels very difficult and doesn't feel achievable. And what I do in my practice to really help individuals is I ask them to keep a journal. And some people don't like journaling. I know personally I have trouble journaling myself, but even take a piece of paper that feels less difficult and write down your wins for the day. And it isn't have to be I got a big raise or my bonus was higher than last year. It could be, I raised something, an idea at a meeting. Just something as small as that to just keep track of the wins that they have. And that can help build the confidence that I did this and it had a good outcome, or I did this and I felt good about it. And having people really catalog, because in the end, what you're really looking to do is reframe how they think about things. And these are very ingrained thought patterns. So disrupting those thought patterns with recognition is helpful. I've also asked people to rewrite the story. So what do you believe? And having them express what they believe. And what would be another way that you could tell yourself a story that this could be, or a narrative that this could be empowering. So someone may be reluctant to, let's just say, raise their hand to do a presentation in front of a group, even though they know the information. So it's not about knowledge, it's really about putting themselves out there. And having them think about the fear is I'm going to go in front of this group and people will find out that I don't know everything that I know. And then reframing that. Well, what would be an empowering story? Empowering story could be I go in front of this group and I can share what I do know. I know more than everyone in the room. And thinking of it that way and discussing strategies when someone asks you the question you don't know the answer to. There's very elegant ways of handling that and professional ways, and having them do that. I've also worked with people and asked them, if your best friend was having this issue, what would you say to them? And they find their own solution. And I would say another technique that I've used is with imagery. I will say, what does this look like to you? I've had people tell me that it looks like an object. So what would you like to do with the object? And sometimes people want to shrink it. Your mind can do anything with it. You know, you could shrink it. You could make it more beautiful. You could destroy it. You could replace it. There's a ton of things that you can do. But going through that mental exercise can be very, very helpful for just moving forward. And I'm a big believer in seeing the power of imagery and having people rethink it. Weather is also great. If this was a weather situation, what would it be like? Oh, it would be a thunderstorm. You know, the rain would be coming down, the winds would be really high. But what would you like it to be like? Oh, I would really love to have like a beautiful sunny day. Temperatures are really nice. I have them step into that sunny day. Well, what would it feel like in that sunny day? And then they talk about I'd be calm. I'd have hope. I would feel courageous. And using those sort of things to help them reframe. I see a hand
I
raised.
have
Yes,
another question.
of course.
A lot of the ladies I speak to are in mid management.
Okay.
There is a lot of frustration, loss of control. There is pressure from the top. There is pressure to be the leader from below, and a lot of churning in the team. So new people keep coming in and going. So before you found your team, your core team, there's already a shift. People keep moving. So I find mid managers very often struggling between finding comfort that or just a familiar ground where something above you is stable and something below you is stable. They never have it perfect. It's always moving and dynamic. And in the middle, you're going through your insecurities, your growth yourself. You're working on yourself. Mistakes happen. Targets are missed. There's a lot going on. It is a war zone for most of us. So how how would you how would you help someone like that?
I would want to start. So if I was coaching someone who is in that situation, I would really ask them, what do you really want? So many times it's not about there's a lot of swirl with my team. There's a lot of transitions in and out. It's something bigger. So I really try to find out like what's underneath it all. It could be, I don't like instability. I'm in this world of constant instability and it doesn't give me what I need. And for some individuals, it may be, I like what I do. I need to find a way to deal with this instability or I need to find anchors. What is stable and hold on to what is stable in my organization. For others, it may be a wake-up call that this may not be for me. Maybe there's another part of the organization that could be a better fit for the individual. So I always like to get underneath it all and really find out, what's really driving the feelings and the perceptions. Because then you'll get to the core.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
So I think we started to talk about this. I'll share some things, and would love to hear other thoughts. I put some things here. I've mentioned a whole bunch of stuff that is not on this slide. But what I would say, some things that are very helpful is normalizing. These are normal feelings. Saying there's something wrong, or don't worry about it. You know, you're really smart. You'll be fine. That's not going to help someone. Self-reflection, as I mentioned, can be very powerful, challenging thoughts because you're really looking to challenge some long-held belief. Is it really true? So in that example with the presentation, is it really true that you don't know the material? And when someone really sits back, probably say, no, I do know the material. In some cases, role playing can be helpful to have them think of a different narrative to tell themselves. I think providing a safe space, and I think coaches and mentors do that, where someone can really say what they feel. That's very valuable in helping them to process what's going on. I talked about the journal or the piece of paper, so doesn't want a journal of the accomplishments, really knowing the accomplishments and owning those accomplishments and feeling really good about those accomplishments. Realistic goals, those I mentioned with the imposter syndrome that people will tend to overwork, over deliver, and they can be disappointed when they set goals that are very high. So there's stretch goals, which I think are a wonderful thing to do, but some people set goals that are unrealistic, and then they feel that they're not good enough because they can't reach it. So really resetting goals and taking those small risks and recognizing the wins that come from those risks can be very valuable. So another piece with the imposter syndrome is where we have individuals who they really seek the external validation, and that's really very important to them. And I'm curious as to how can you help a client or a mentee seek validation from themselves and developing that internal confidence as opposed to looking outward? What has worked?
What I've done is I asked them if they've been in a situation that's similar in the past, if they've overcome something similar, maybe in a personal sense or in a different context, not work.
Right.
It could be with parenting, it could be with relationships. And once they identify something similar, we break it down and say, what were the beliefs? What were you thinking at the time? What worked? What didn't work? What did you learn? Uh, and even if you failed, how did you manage that? Was it that bad? Was it as bad as you thought it was? And
Right.
just looking back at how many resources came to their help at that point. So, what helped you? Was it your resourcefulness? Did you ask for help? Did you read a book? Did you go on YouTube? What were the resources you used to find your way through it? And usually, those patterns are also transferable to what they're dealing with right now, because it is an internal resource, creativity and problem solving.
Right.
So, once they see that they've done it before, it becomes easier to do it now. So that I think also allows them to just be independent of the mentor, because you don't want them keep coming back to you for solutions. So allowing them to see that they have been resourceful is always a good thing that works for me.
I couldn't agree more. I do that a lot in my practice, just asking people when have you been in a similar situation? And then they start describing what they did. Some of it may not have been pretty as to how they tried to change things, and some of it is really life-changing. And when they realize, to your point, that they have the skills to do it, and they've actually done it in the past. I've seen people take inspiration from others that they're close to. I see that in my personal life where there are people who may have been laid off from their position. And then they take inspiration from other people to say, you know what, this person was in this job. They didn't like that job. I didn't like my job either. And wow, they found themselves in this other role. They're really very happy. And it's what they wanted. And in the end, this was a really good thing that happened to them. And looking at success stories and getting that inspiration can sometimes be really helpful. I would also say that having people understand what strengths they really have, because sometimes people don't realize what strengths they have. And there are certainly different tools that can be used, assessments to really help people identify their strengths. But that could be something that is really very valuable, and reflecting on how can you leverage those strengths as you're going through the challenge that you're going through. And that's something that people find very helpful.
Also, Joyce, what is the role values play in this? I know beliefs play a role. What do you think if someone wants something organized and is not in a place where things are organized? Um, is it for us to encourage them to continue to find solutions, or I just want to know, and they need the job. Like most of us don't want change, right? So we want to keep the
Right.
job, we want to do our best here. How can you create space for transition in places like that?
I think if it's, so I'll go off and if I'm not answering your question, please let me know. Values are really important, and they're what we hold, and how we make decisions, and will determine, what's a good fit for us for a job and what isn't. So if someone's in a position and it bumps up against their values, they can find a way to change the situation to the extent that it's under their control, or they can accept it, and in some cases, people might modify their values because that's the way they need to do to fit in. But certainly that's always a personal decision. Any other points on this question in front of us? I'll move on to so I have some discussion questions for us. Um, I just have a general question as to, questions do you have? And also, what advice do you have for someone who is working with a client or a mentee who has the imposter syndrome?
Guys, I think there are some questions on the chat.
Okay.
Yes. We have one from Priyal Gupta, and she's asked if you ever felt like you're just faking it at work, even though you're doing well, what does one do about it?
I think I love this question, and I love the part of even though you're doing well. So I think the whole thought, if this person was coming to me, what I would do is really hone in on the doing well piece and really focus on why do you think you're faking it when you're doing well. So that's what I would suggest in this situation. Open up a dialogue around that. It's an internal belief.
Could you guide us to some tests that would allow someone to gauge things around values, things around beliefs, just gauge how seriously down this road they are?
The test that I know that does a really deep look at that would be Hogan assessments. It has three different parts, and one part is values. So there's nothing in that test, that personality assessment, that says it's not a good or a bad. It's just this is what is. And
How
it gives you
much of it?
some very good information, and it has several different scales and gives you information as to, what the values are. And there are also, it's used for executive coaching. It's also could be used in hiring situations, especially for senior hires. So, for example, if you had someone who was introverted, and they wanted to be in a sales position, it's not to say that they couldn't do it, but they're going to have to work harder than someone who is extroverted and loves to be with people and loves to be selling things. You would want your chief financial officer to be someone who's very high in a commerce rating, um, interested in making money. Um, that would be that would be one thing that you would probably be very interested, as opposed to someone who's not interested, who's at the other end of the scale, may not be the best fit, because their values don't align. So just data points, I would say. So I see the question here in the chat, does imposter syndrome look different when you're just starting out versus leading a team? In my experience, the underlying beliefs are the same, it just plays out differently. So as an individual starting, when you're first starting out, you're an individual contributor most likely. And you may be feeling like, to the previous question, like you're faking it. You, your success is really based on luck. When you become leading a team, the mindset might be something like, um, I don't know why I got promoted into this position. I am, I'm going to have to, people may find me out at some point because I'm not who they think I really am. So that will permeate. It could, and I'm kind of speculating here, it could wind up impacting the team if the person is very high in the imposter syndrome scale and they have a lot of anxiety and they're overworking and having their team believe that they also need to overwork. So it can definitely affect the culture. So it's another great question here. What is something small I can do when the imposter thoughts creep in, and any go-to habit or mindset shift that could help? I think there's a few habits that could be brought in. I think first is understanding what is your trigger. So what triggers those imposter syndrome thoughts, and really understanding that and looking to reframe those thoughts. So I feel uncomfortable applying for this promotional opportunity, but I'm going to do it anyway. And I'm going to take a small step and put myself out there. And then if I'm being considered, I'll take another small step and viewing it that way. Um, and it's really important to change that internal dialogue that an individual is having. Some people, it's really helpful to talk it through with someone that they trust. For others, it could be meditation, and leveraging meditation to quiet the mind. It could be visualization that someone could use. And I mentioned some things that in my work that I do with people that they can do themselves to really help have a mind shift change. But it's work. I will be the first to say it is work.
It's also in a culture like India where we're not used to asking for help. We're not used to being vulnerable. And not doing well emotionally is bad news as a culture. Or even saying, I'm not able to cope with this, or I just can't get up today, I don't want to go to work. And these are symptoms, but we don't talk about it enough to be able to take away the shame that comes with it. The shame of maybe I'm lazy, maybe I'm not. Why am I not able to catch up with the others? Everyone else is doing so well. The comparison, and it's also gender, like you said. The men, it's even difficult for the men to say that I'm finding it hard to do this, and we don't know where to go ask questions. So it's also the culture that's very suppresses these things. Um, and I think having mentors in the system helps because then you have a neutral party to it. So in that sense, we at least have these safe spaces, pockets of safe spaces. What I'm encouraging the women to do is to create a sisterhood because anyway we're in batches of learning. I said anyway we're being vulnerable in these spaces. Can we continue to be in touch? Can we continue to share? Can we continue to talk to each other? Because anyway now we're sharing our stories online, so let's keep in touch and just build those little cells of safe spaces. So I think that helps a lot.
I agree with the sharing of information. I was reading something about a professor who I may have been teaching psychology or something like that, and came into a room with students who were freshmen and said, "How many people here are experiencing the imposter syndrome?" And every hand went up in the room, and that started a sharing, and the students actually felt better as a result of that. Just that simple act of sharing. You're not alone. Get through this together. So I'd just like to turn for some final thoughts here. What was your greatest learning? And how will you take these learnings to enhance your practice with supporting those who have the imposter syndrome?
I think for me, using the visualization techniques, I'm a neuro-linguistic coach, and I do understand how modalities and visualizing and helping someone step out of their head and just getting into a situation and getting their state, changing state to be able to handle what they're dealing with and really make it real and then process it in a safe space. I'm going to try that because I think I was myself being an imposter and saying, oh, let me not do this. It sounds like mumbo jumbo. Let me be the corporate coach. But I'm so glad I spoke to you because now I feel confident that yes, it is actually something that will work in this particular kind of a context. So for me, that's like quite. I think I've gotten over that speed bump for myself. And thank you for the shout out to Hogan Assessments. I will be looking at it and seeing how it helps my mentees.
Sure. And the one thing with visualization, I was involved in a situation where someone was really processing some work issues and was very upset about it. And what we did is the person was asked, like, well, what would you like to, if you could take all these issues, what would you like to do? And they said, like, I would like to throw it in a dumpster. And
Well,
mentally took it and threw it in a mental dumpster. And then what would you like to do with the dumpster? I like to set it on fire. I was like, okay.
yeah,
So they mentally set it on fire and they felt a ton better after doing that. Just such a simple,
yeah.
simple exercise and what relief the person had. It's amazing. Just going to check the chat and see if there's anything in the chat here. My advice to a client who is experiencing imposter syndrome is to think of challenging milestone and past they achieved and how they do it. Recall those moments of accomplishments. It's excellent. Excellent technique. Any other thoughts, questions, observations?
I liked what you said about journaling the small wins because they're so focused on the big ones and it's so visible that some of them are not achieving. So it's
Right.
nice, even as a team, if we can, every week just talk about what win did you have today, and just build that confidence, not just for yourself but as a team together. I think that would be really a reminder and some and little breadcrumbs that help you believe in yourself. That
Right.
felt like something that would work for my girls.
That's excellent. I'd like to, hopefully this will work. I did say this. Yeah, I've put in the chat my LinkedIn address. I know it was on the invitation to this session. So if you would like to stay in touch, that would be wonderful. And if you have any questions, I'm available.
I think that was a lovely session, and I'm gonna tag your LinkedIn as well when we post so that people can get in touch with you on their own. If anyone has any other questions? No. Thank you so much, Joyce, for such an insightful session. It was really,
No,
really good to learn
thank
so
you.
much about imposter syndrome. I think when we heard about it, it seemed like not something that, most of us would be feeling, but then once speaking to you has really like opened up our eyes and how it could also happen in the workplace. So thank you so much for that.
Oh, I appreciate the opportunity. It's a topic I feel a lot of passion about, and I love helping my clients through this.
That's wonderful. Joyce, if you ever have something more to say about imposter syndrome, I'll come and talk to you about it because we do a lot of
Okay.
as well. Yeah. And we'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure,
Oh,
sure.
thank you so much, everyone, for this.
Thank you.
Have a
Have
good day.